Good morning. So God will provide, no? Iba nang ibig sabihin pala na, no? Naalala ko tuloy ngayon na yung tatay pala yung God. So iba yung interpretation niya of Father as God. But anyway, today I will be talking to you about a story which is a continuation of the passage that was already taken up by Kuya Ed. So I have titled my message. Dali ha. Okay, there you go. Okay, it's being set up. Let me share with you first a story. The noted author John Killinger tells a powerful story about a man who is alone in a hotel room in Canada. The man is in a state of deep depression. He is so depressed that he can't even bring himself to go downstairs to the restaurant to eat. He is a powerful man, usually the chairman of a large shipping company, but at that moment, he is absolutely overwhelmed by the pressures and demands of life. And he lies there on a lonely hotel bed, far from home, wallowing in self-pity. And he couldn't help it. He was just in deep depression. He worries and broods and agonizes about everything. So he has anxiety problems. He thinks about his business, his investments, his decisions, his family, his health, even his dogs. Then on this day, in this Canadian hotel, he craters. He hits bottom. Filled with anxiety, completely immobilized, paralyzed by his emotional despair, unable to leave his room, lying on his bed, he moans out loud, "Life isn't worth living this way. I wish I were dead." And then he wonders what God would think if he heard him talking this way. Speaking aloud again, he says, "God, it's a joke, isn't it? Life is nothing but a joke." Suddenly, it occurs to the man that this is the first time he actually talked to God since he was a little boy. He is silent for a moment and then he begins to pray. He describes it like this: "I just talked out loud about what a mess my life was in and how tired I was and how much I wanted things to be different in my life. And you know what happened next? A voice. I heard a voice say, 'It doesn't have to be that way.' That's all." He went home and talked to his wife about what happened. He talked to his brother, who is a minister, and asked him, "Do you think it was God speaking to me?" His brother said, "Of course, because that is the message of God to you and every one of us. That's the message of the Bible. That's why Jesus came into the world, to save us, to deliver us, to free us, to change us, and to show us that it doesn't have to be that way." A few days later, the man called his brother and said, "You were right. It has really happened. I've done it. I've had a rebirth. I'm a new man. Christ has turned it around for me." Our message for today centers around this particular kind of a scene in which a man who not only we have a man here, but who was in a situation that was worse than depression. He was actually under the power of demons. His life badly needed changing, but he was so helpless to the point that he can't even ask for help. And just like the man that I mentioned earlier, even though the restaurant was just downstairs. He couldn't make himself go there to eat. And this man that we will be talking about also is in that state where just can't help it to ask and can't even ask for help, even though he needs it very badly. Last week, Kuya Ed, Engineer Ed, talked about the calming of the storm. You remember that story in which Jesus calmed the storm? And the disciples were very frightened because they might drown, and they woke up Jesus, who was sleeping, and Jesus basically rebuked the storm. I've titled my message "Redeemed from Bondage," and our passage is from Luke 8:26-39. So this is about that story of last week. Just to recap. He got up and rebuked the wind and the raging waters. The storm subsided and all was calm. And he said to them, "Where is your faith?" So that was the question he asked his disciples. In fear and amazement, they asked one another, "Who is this? He commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him." I'd like to focus on these two questions in my message today. Where is your faith? And who is this? These two questions we will answer as we go further in our story. But just for us to remember, these are the two important questions that we'll be talking about. With these two questions in mind, who is this and where is your faith, we come to the second miracle in the event of Matthew 8, and which is also what we will be dealing with. So let's go to the main text, verse 26. They sailed to the region of Gerasenes, which is across the lake from Galilee. So remember, Jesus wanted them to go, and they didn't actually know where they were going. They just went into the boat, but Jesus said, "Okay, let's go to this region, which is across the lake from Galilee." And the place Gerasenes is located east of the Sea of Galilee. It is a Gentile region, and Jesus chose this place to go and spread the good news of God's kingdom and salvation. They sailed to the region of the Gerasenes, which is across the lake from Galilee. When Jesus stepped ashore, he was met by a demon-possessed man from the town. For a long time, this man had not worn clothes or lived in a house, but had lived in the tomb. So imagine po natin yung kalagayan niya, no? So we can sort of imagine this as someone who is deranged in our society, but let us remember that this is actually a demon-possessed man. And the Bible is very clear that it is a demon possession. So a demon-possessed man met or came to Jesus. The man is described to have lost all indications of normal human existence. He wore no clothing. He was exposed with no sense of propriety or shame. He had not lived in a house, meaning he had lost all connections with his family and loved ones. He didn't belong. He couldn't belong. He is also described to have lived in tombs. So parang sa atin siguro, we can imagine someone living in sa cementerio. Kung mayroong bakanting niche doon siya natutulog sa gabi. So what kind of life this person is in? He was living among the dead. So demon possession alienates the person from his own people. It degrades the person's dignity and empties him of all human respect. It makes him helpless against the forces of the demons and the evil spirits. A person will have absolutely no control over his own thinking and actions because a possessed person is owned by, possessed by, controlled by an evil power. Worst of all, demon possession alienates the person from God. The man in the story had a miserable life. He was alone. He must have been very, very lonely. Notice also that we see here for a long time. How long? 5 years? 10 years? 15 years? Picture this in your mind and dwell on it for a while. Imagine what the condition of that man's life must have been. What must it be like to be in that man's shoes? Not that he has any shoes, but we see a turn of events when Jesus stepped ashore in the place where the man was. In his most hopeless state, Jesus came to him. Continuing now, when he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell at his feet, shouting at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had commanded the impure spirit to come out of the man. As the demon-possessed man saw Jesus, he shouted and fell at his feet. This is not falling at the feet of Jesus in order to worship him. No, it's not like that. Rather, it is in submission to Jesus. The demons are subject to the authority of Jesus. They are defeated. There is not a battle raging between God and Satan. And we should not think of that as even happening right now. Again, I repeat, there is no battle raging between God and Satan. Satan and his demons cannot act outside what God allows. And we have seen this in the story of Job. That is why the demon in the man asked the question, "What do you want with me?" They were subject to. They were not worshiping Jesus, but they were subject to him. They continued, "I beg you, don't torture me." So the demons were pleading. So who's the boss here? Okay. The torture referred to here is the judgment and punishment for Satan, the devil, and his demons that God has reserved in the future. We find that in Revelation 20, verse 10. Earlier, I asked that you remember two questions. Who is this? Is one of the questions. And here it is answered. Son of the Most High God. Remember in the story of the disciples when Jesus calmed the storm? That was their question. Who is this? They could not even think of Jesus beyond his humanity. He was thought of as just a miracle worker, a human being, but not really a son of God. The irony is, the demons really knew who Jesus was. And that's the answer to the first question. Jesus, Son of the Most High God. Jesus, Son of the Most High God. And it was because Jesus is the Son of the Most High God that he was able to calm the storm in the sea. The disciples had no spiritual insight, but demons have this spiritual insight. The demons knew better. Knowing Jesus is one thing, obeying him in worship and love is another. That is what the demons cannot do and will not do. Continuing on now. This is in Revelation 20, just to give you an idea. Okay, Luke 8 na tayo. Many times it has seized him, and though he was chained hand and foot and kept under guard, he had broken his chains and had been driven by the demon into solitary places. So it's actually the demon that separates, that alienated the man from his own community, from his own support system, from the love of his family. And when someone is demon-possessed, his strength becomes superhuman. He cannot be restrained, and he can be very dangerous. That's why we are not to underestimate the danger of being exposed to someone who is possessed. Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "Legion," he replied, because many demons had gone into him. And they begged Jesus repeatedly not to order them into the abyss. By Jesus asking the name of the demon, it became apparent that there were many of them. And maybe that also explained why the man cannot be subdued. A legion of soldier in Roman cavalry is about 6,000 people, 6,000 soldiers. So in this case, it didn't say 6,000, but probably there are so many that have entered into this man that gave him the superhuman strength. Yet though they were many, they were powerless before Jesus. Instead, they were begging Jesus not to order them to go into the abyss. Abyss is understood when you say abyss sa mga Jews, they think of it as a deep hole. A deep hole, a bottomless pit. We are familiar with that term. And the Jews think of the abyss as a place for evil spirits. So, in Revelation 20, verse 3, we read this. In 1 Peter 2, verse 4. "For if God did not spare the angels when they sinned, but sent them to hell, Tartarus, or also abyss, putting them in chains of darkness to be held in judgment." So, perhaps this is what the demons were protesting against. So the legion were afraid of being judged and punished by Jesus at that particular time of encounter. So continuing with our story, so this is just a picture of the man who came to Jesus. He was undressed. He had nothing on, okay? Now, a large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside. The demons begged Jesus to let them go into the pigs, and he gave them permission. When the demons came out of the man, they went into the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake, and they were drowned. The command of Jesus is that they come out of the man, and the demons had to obey. The request of the demons is that they go into the pigs. And Jesus allowed that. Remember, evil spirits cannot do anything beyond the will of God. Now, what happened to the demons? Did they drown too? These are spirit beings, right? We might ask the questions, if the pigs died, how about the demons? What happened to them? Luke did not elaborate, and therefore we need not worry about it. He wrote what he deemed important. So what happened to the demons after the pigs were drowned is of no consequence to the story. What happened to the man that Jesus had freed him from the bondage of demon possession is of consequence to us. And for Luke, that is the important part of the story. That's what he focused on. And therefore, that is what we need to focus on also. The man is finally free. That has to be the most important point in this story. When those tending the pigs saw what happened, they ran off. Reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what happened. So, remember, ang sabi dito kasi, they went out ito yung mga, those tending the pigs. So, these are the people who were caring for the pigs. So, they don't own the pigs, so probably they went back and reported what happened to the town. The people went out to see what happened. If it was really true that the man they knew for so many years as demon-possessed is already free of that. And not only that, yung pigs, they were drowned. They all died. So ito yung mga tinignan ng mga tao. When they came to Jesus, the people in the town came to Jesus, they found the man from whom the demons had gone out sitting at Jesus' feet. Interesting, right? Kanina, the demons fell at Jesus' feet, and we have here a man who is now sitting at Jesus' feet. So different. After he was freed, there was a change in this person. He was dressed, no longer naked, and in his right mind. His mind was no longer controlled by demons. But, look, the people were afraid. Diba? Very interesting. Why were they afraid? About what were they afraid of? Those who had seen it told the people how the demon-possessed man had been cured. So, it's not a temporary thing na parang, the man was totally, completely cured. So the people realized that the man they knew to be demon-possessed, who was deranged, who was naked, filthy, baho-baho, is now acting normally. In his right mind. We have to think of this as no small magic. This is actually a miracle, an act of God who was compassionate. And this God is actually Jesus. Unfortunately, instead of rejoicing, the people became afraid. Then all the people in the region of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them because they were overcome with fear. Remember in the story of the storm? After Jesus calmed the storm, what was the reaction of the disciples? They were amazed and were filled with fear. Okay. Were they afraid of Jesus? In this case, they asked Jesus to leave them because they were overcome with fear. That makes us think, right? Why are they afraid of this? Why were they so fearful? Why were they overcome with fear? One conclusion we can draw is that the thousands of pigs that had drowned that day was a great financial loss to the people. Remember, these are pigs and these are Gentiles. They were afraid because Jesus was a Jew and considers pigs unclean. He could wipe out their livelihood of pigs by his miracles if he stayed. Maybe that is what they were thinking. However, the life of the man was of no consequence to them. Pigs were more important than the sanity, the restoration of a man. It didn't matter whether this man was demon-possessed and living a miserable life, so long as life was normal for the rest of them. In a sense, the life of the thousand of pigs was more precious than the life of this one man. Okay lang po na we have one person who is deranged, who is demon-possessed, who's living a filthy life, as long as our livelihood is intact. As long as our lives are normal. As long as hindi po kami affected. Siya lang po. Okay lang po na nandyan ho siya sa sementeryo, nabubuhay siya na ganyan. Okay lang po. Basta hindi po kami affected. Now, when Jesus changed that by sacrificing the pigs over the life of this man, they were afraid of losing their livelihood. And they asked Jesus to leave them. How ironic. Did Jesus condemn them for that? Jesus got into the boat and left. The way Luke recorded it, so simple. So, he got up, got into the boat, and left. Jesus did not protest, and neither did he condemn the people for their unbelief and rejection of him. Without making a scene, he simply, quietly left. But the man who was delivered from the demons wanted to follow Jesus. Remember, he was in his right mind already. And because he was in his right mind, he recognized who Jesus was. He appreciated what happened to him. And when he was sitting at Jesus' feet, meaning to say he was listening to him, he was learning from him, he was receiving the good news, he was understanding what Jesus' work is all about, who he was. He wanted to follow him. The man whom the demons had gone out begged to go with him. He wanted to follow Jesus. He begged Jesus to go with him, but Jesus, what? Sent him away. Now, this sent him away is not rejecting the person of the man. In fact, he said, no, don't follow me, don't be like one of my disciples, because, he says here, return home and tell how much God has done for you. Let's stay in that verse for a minute. Return home and tell how much God has done for you. He had no home for so many years. He had no family. He had nobody. He hasn't experienced love. He didn't connect socially with anyone. And Jesus said, return home. Because of this change, you will have a home. You will have your own people to welcome you. And he said, and tell how much God has done for you. How much? How much? So the man obeyed. He went away and told all over town, not just to the family, but all over town, how much Jesus had done for him. Imagine that person who was so helpless, who was so filthy, so dirty, rejected by the society, coming back to his old self, normal self, redeemed by Jesus Christ, and now going back. And by his own life, by his own testimony, becomes a witness to others. Instead of going with him and traveling with Jesus, Jesus told him, no, you can't stay. You can't stay here. Go ahead. Go back home. This is your work. This is your task. Okay? Jesus made this man to be God's witness to the people that rejected him. He sent him back to tell the good news of just how much God has done for him. He did exactly according to the command of Jesus. Notice, so the man went away and told all over town how much God and Jesus had done for him. What has God done for him? He was delivered from the bondage or slavery of the demons. He got back his dignity. He got back his sanity and decency. He was able to relate with other people again. He got his life back. And he got spiritual life in him. because he also gained Jesus. What has the man done to deserve all these? What has the man done to deserve all these? Did he call upon Jesus to come and heal him? What has the man, did he do anything to catch the attention of Jesus? Did he do something to warrant mercy from Jesus? What has the man done to deserve all these? Nothing. Jesus came all the way for this one man who was a Gentile, who was rejected by everybody else. Not because of the man's merit, but because of God's mercy. The man was totally helpless. He could not ask for help. There was nothing he could do to change his life. God in Jesus came to him and redeemed him from a life that is lower than the life of the pigs. God did it all. Who is this man, Jesus? Jesus is the merciful God. When the man regained his normal mind, he was able to commune with Jesus. He was able to trust him. In his right mind, he was able to obey him. That's trust. Remember the second question, where is your faith? And this man was able to actually demonstrate that. His faith was in Jesus. He obeyed. He followed him. He bore witness and proclaimed just how much God has done for him. That is faith. That is faith in Jesus. And it's the same faith that he wants to share to his own people. There are basically three stories. If you look at the whole story, there are three lessons, that we can draw. One is that evil spirits are real. So let's not doubt that. We need to guard ourselves of Satan's influences in the world we live in. When I was in high school, meron pong mga pag-break. There was a time when yung mga kaklase ko po ay nagkakaroon sila ng spirit of the glass session. Okay? They may kandila, they have that board, and all are saying they are not moving that glass. They just put their hands on the glass and it moved. And they've been doing that for a couple of days, and then all of a sudden, for no apparent reason, sabi nung isa, I wasn't there, biglang sumara yung door, na walang hangin, and then something happened that everyone in the room, they shouted and they came out of the room. So, it's real. And there are other ways by which Satan actually deceives people. It could be in tarot cards, it could be in other forms. But let's not make a mistake. They do exist. And in terms of demon possession, our website has this to say. In general, symptoms of this demon possession would include hostile reaction to the name of Jesus, the presence of unnatural, foreboding feeling of evil. You sort of sense that. Involvement in the occult and witchcraft. Prominent feelings of unforgiveness, bitterness, anger. A person usually is antisocial. And another is supernatural strength. And also self-abusive behavior. None of these guarantees a demon possession, and a diagnosis should be made only with careful counsel. But we acknowledge that such can exist. Another lesson we can draw from this story is that Jesus is sovereign over all the evil spirits. So Jesus is sovereign over all the evil spirits. He is powerful. In this story, the following phrases were mentioned. And if you notice, you will see just why I say this, that Jesus is sovereign over all the evil spirits. These are the phrases that we have read. What do you want with me, Jesus? The demon said that. What do you want with me? So who is subject to whom? The demon is subject to Jesus. They also said, I beg you. They were begging. They were not fighting with Jesus. They were not, Jesus, I don't agree with you, but they said, I beg you. They begged Jesus repeatedly not to order them. The demons begged Jesus. The word beg occurred about 5 times. I think 5 times in that story. And Jesus gave them permission. So who's in charge? Who has supreme power over the spirit world? Jesus Christ. As mentioned in the article, we can command the evil spirits to live by the authority of Jesus. But we must be careful that we do not take this task carelessly, because we can easily be subdued by strong forces we cannot control. We must be careful not to irresponsibly label a demon possessions for someone who actually have mental illnesses or disorders. So some people actually are not demon possessed. We might be saying they are, but actually they have various mental disorders. And the third lesson is we have a responsibility to proclaim our personal experiences of God's incredible love and mercy to others. For the man, it was not an option. We are very grateful when we experience, for example, escape from accidents. Some of us have had that experience. When we regain our physical strength after a long bout with illness, having our deepest needs answered, and going through a renewal in our spiritual life. These are things that are worth proclaiming and sharing with others. So when we have these experiences, kanya-kanya po tayo ng mga ganitong experiences, the lesson that we see from this story is we have to share it. We have to. We need to. Once we come through from all of our, some people may have issues with, for example, family tragedies, sometimes addictions, emotional pains, emotional abandonment, some desperations, yes, depressions and all. But once we come through, we learn to trust God even more. Our faith is increased through both the difficult periods of life as well as in the happy ones. As much as we acknowledge God's grace and love in all our personal experiences, we often are predisposed to keep these to ourselves. Hindi ba? Pag halimbawa, you were so sick and you finally got well, yeah, we're very grateful. We express that, we usually keep it to ourselves. So I tend to be like that. Okay, I tend to be private about that. But when I was reading this, sabi ko, nagkulang ako dito. This is an area that I need to change. I need to work on. God, however, is teaching us to share our testimonies of just how much God has done for us. And we have to share this to others. This is not an option to the man who wanted to follow Jesus. And if we want to follow Jesus, we have to do the same. In order to follow Jesus, the man was commanded to stay and witness to His people. We are commanded and encouraged to do the same. Our words and works must reflect God's very nature and love towards others. And sometimes we have to share more intentionally than just yung by incident lang. No? So here are a few of the applications that I'd like to share with you. Bondage. We all have some form of bondage that alienates us from God and others. We all have sinned. But what kinds of bondage and slavery are you experiencing right now that you have absolutely no power to change? Do you have destructive habits, addictions, negative thinking patterns that have alienated you from your loved ones? Have we created false image of reality in which the self has become the center of our existence and other people are of no significance compared to us? Do we have a habit of considering material possessions or job security as more important than a life of a family member? Have we become miserable and yet not know it? Or have we become miserable and we know these bandages and yet we don't ask help? So another is blessings. We all need to be more aware of just how much God has done for us. Maybe we need to think about, 10 things every day after the day is over and say, Lord, what are at least 10 things you want me to remember this day that I need to be thankful for because you have given it, because you have shown it to me. It could be a lesson in life. It could be a correction from others. Correction is sometimes difficult to receive. But when we look back, maybe these are our blessings. How much have you thought about God's great love for you lately? Do we even think about it? Or do the problems of life cloud our thinking that we lose sight of God's care and involvement in our lives? Sometimes we magnify and we focus so much on the problems, we forget the vast blessings that we receive from God. Our faith should be in Him. And lastly, we need to bear fruit. Sabi ni Mother Teresa, a life not lived for others is not a life. How wonderful. How wonderful a thought. How much have we openly shared as a witness to God's power in our lives, God's goodness to others? Just like the man in our story, he went back. He went back home. And he had to share it. And that word bears fruit for God. If we are uncomfortable sometimes with sharing our testimony of God's goodness to us, we can start with our family. We can start with our kids. This is how my day went. This is how, some of the things that I'm struggling with. These are the things that I'm very thankful for. And we start with that. And if we are ready, then maybe coming over here and sharing that as a witness to the whole community of believers is proper. And we invite you to do that. And I would be so happy if we could do more of that. But also, we have opportunities in our workplaces where, we can talk about God's love for them as we have experienced it. It has to be a personal thing. But the object is that we bear fruit. Okay? In conclusion, we must get to know Jesus through the revelation of the Bible. We must grow from just knowing about Him to experiencing Him. He is not just a person with intriguing ideas or philosophies. He's not just a historical figure. When we truly know Him as the Son of the living God, we can be assured that He can free us from our bondage and any bondage that we have in our lives. And we have security in Him against the devil and against sin. Because Jesus is God, we can put our total faith in Him. It is in Him that we ought to have faith. Where is our faith? Not in us. It is in Him, and in Him alone, because He's the Son of the living God. He is our deliverer. He is our Savior. He is our Redeemer. And when we really think about it, all of us here, in one form or another, had been redeemed. So let us go and proclaim this good news of God's mercy and good news to others.